thank you all for making the effort to come tonight. We know how busy it is in the spring, especially with kids at an independent school. It seems like there's always something, right? So we are grateful that you're here. This is the inaugural event. It's a joint venture with Kelly Molander from Alumni Development. So a nice round. Kelly set all this up. So
thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
And the brainchild of this is, unlike in the past, where we, get up and disseminate information and talk about things like timelines and planning and whatnot. We're really excited now to introduce more of a social element to it, to provide an opportunity for parents to connect. Wilbraham and Munson Academy, like most schools, we're a community. And as a community, we have to rely on each other for information sometimes. The only caveat to that is there's a lot of misinformation that can happen sometimes. And most often like at parties, in the kitchen, right? And sometimes that's where the misinformation about this is what you have to do to get into Duke, right? Or if you haven't taken that course, you're going to be at a disadvantage. But that's why you have experts here, okay? And a parent expert. This is Brenda Labby.
Yay, Brenda, thank you.
Brenda is the former head of the Parents Association, Wilbraham and Munson, and works tirelessly and helped us. And she has a son who's a sophomore at Penn, and a daughter who is, did she just deposit?
She did.
At South?
Yep.
And she's all excited. So we have a resident parent expert. So please feel free to ask any questions. Because there are some questions, right? College planning is so personal that there are some questions that are better answered by a parent that's gone through it. So I should have introduced myself first. John Buzang, I know a lot of you, obviously. This is my 19th year at Wilbraham and Munson, 12th as Director of College Counseling. I love it here. It is a community, it is my home. And I'm grateful every day I get up and make that long 200-yard commute to work. I used to work in Manhattan, so I really appreciate that. This is Maureen Felicheski, proud graduate of WMA, also 12th year in college counseling, associate director of college counseling, testing coordinator, keeps me organized, which is awesome. So, and this is Greg Walsh. Greg is second year, also an associate director. More than 30 years experience in independent schools, mostly in college counseling. So, what we want to do tonight, again, is just to give you some information about what your sons and daughters can expect in the coming month, then in the coming years. So, it's hard to envision. Show of hands, who's a rookie in the college planning? Who's first time through the process? Okay. All right. It's all going to be okay. Fine. All right. You got some good partners.
You will make it through.
You will make it through. What we really subscribe to is a partnering approach in college planning, right? And because we are the global school that has this thread in economics, we use an economics model for this. So it's a partnering approach where think of your son or daughter as the CEO of Susie's college planning or Jimmy's college planning, right? And they're in charge of making the day-to-day decisions, right? They kind of know which way they want this thing to go. Not yet, right? That's going to come, but that's okay. You, the parents, are members of the board, right? Because you know your kid, you know the CEO better than the CEO knows himself, right? In many ways. They won't agree with you on that, right? But you also have a checkbook. So, and so you can give them advice, and you should give them advice, right? And we should exchange ideas and thoughts and excitement and fears and questions, all of that. It can be a very nerve-wracking thing. This is the first real big decision in your kid's life. It's probably second. Well, the first one was coming here, but moving away from home, right, can create a whole different level. of anxiety at the college level. I know there's some, show of hands, boarding students? Okay, that's good. So the communication is key in a partnering approach. We're chairs of the board, so think of it like, because we know the industry so well, right? It's our job to stay up on trends and all of that, and we also can nudge your kids. My dad always had a saying, he said, you know, Johnny, there's 6 inches between a pat and back and a kick in the butt. So I got a kick in the butt. But I learned. So, but it's that type of thing. I'm not going to kick your kids in the butt, unless you say I can't. But anyway, so it's that type of approach where we want to support your kids in the right way. For some kids, they are reticent initially. You know, who has seen that? If you talk to your kids about college, are there nerves there? There's a vast unknown there in some respects. So some kids react to that by, you know, kind of cowering a little bit or making pretend it doesn't bother them or not communicating. But that will pass, right? It has to pass because you can't stop the future from coming, right? So I guess my point is rely on us and rely on each other. And this is the first step in establishing those relationships, that partnership, right? And in communicating with one another. So I can't wait to have our sit-down departure dinner when your kids are seniors, you know, and then to see your kids get their diplomas going up underneath the tents. It's an exciting time. So we're just honored and privileged to be a part of it. I went off script, so I probably will have to find my way back. So Bill Wells is also part of the college counseling team. He works with 4 or 5 kids. He has a previous engagement. He's actually videotaping live stream the rugby game. And there's been no injuries, which is a good thing. I checked and there was no score. So we're playing a team from Canada, which is kind of cool. Well, we're the global school. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy, Wilbraham & Munson College Counseling Philosophy. Some of this we did talk a little bit about. Were there any folks here over family weekend for the college counseling presentation? Okay, so some of this will be repetitive, but we're going to try to spice it up and infuse it with some new information. Our philosophy begins and ends with fit, right? When I was 15, 16, 17, I wanted to go to Dartmouth. I don't know why. I just watched a hockey game one time and I liked the color green, right? So sometimes it's as arbitrary as that, but I survived not going to Dartmouth, which is awesome, right? So because I, like your kids, found that fit. And not to say that I would not have fit in at that school, I just found a better fit, and they didn't let me in. So there's that. So in finding fit, we go to great lengths to try to understand your kids, right? And listen to them. You know, in our initial meetings with kids, when we do a draft in December junior year, we draft your kids. You know, it's kind of like Major League draft, no, it's not. But anyway, so. But we try to get to know them. So it would be, your kids would be assigned to the college counselor where there's a lot of interaction, overlap. And by then we know them fairly well. That's just after the beginning of junior seminar. We're going to go through some of this stuff. But in aligning them with a college advisor that knows them well, we're already halfway there to understanding them to get to fit. Okay. We have an open door policy. We have, I think, some of the nicest offices on campus, which is pretty cool. And it's a warm, inviting environment. If you would like to come in, we encourage you, even now, come in and have a conversation, get to know one another. Okay. With your sons and daughters, the college planning really starts to gain traction next winter with the advent of junior seminar and then the one-on-one meetings after the draft. And what we're getting to is trying to identify a range of schools. So a range of schools that offer things your kids would be excited to experience. It might be a certain major that they're interested in, or a certain part of the country, right? Or a size, or if it's a hooked kid, meaning like an athlete or a singer or an oboist, right? Any oboe players? They're in high demand. There's probably not enough time to give lessons to get that good, but if you have a kid who's like 4, maybe get them on the oboe. So, but we're trying to find a range of schools, right, that meet their preferences and interests and talents and all of that, where they can thrive. You know, we talk about college planning as a treasure hunt, and we really try to emphasize this to kids. You only get 4 years of college, and it can be a blast. It can be a lot of work, and it can be sometimes filled with failure that you learn from and trying and whatnot, but it's a blast. So that's why we do put it in that context of don't cheat yourself. Fully invest in the search, trying to identify a fit. The other thing that we do is we try to make sure it's a balanced and realistic list, all right? So, you know, a reach for Susie might be a target for Jim, and, you know, likely on down the line. So a balanced list is ultimately when your son or daughter goes to apply, no more than 10. Might have a couple of likelies in there. A likely is a school where pretty much we can envision admission without much difficulty, all right? So transcript, SAT scores, activities, all of that, the profile of your son or daughter far exceeds the profile of the average admitted student at a likely, okay? And then maybe a couple, 3 targets, you know, and that's where your son or daughter's profile approximates the average profile of the previously admitted class, and then reaches, right? Occasionally we'll get some kids that take a shotgun approach, right? And then they'll apply to more than 10. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say how many. We've had kids apply to more than 30. And it's exhausting because now more and more schools have what's called supplemental essays, right? And that just adds a whole different level and layer of work and stress. One kid in particular got into 20 schools, I remember, right? He had 4 weeks to decide where he wants to go. There's a thing called National Deposit Day. It's May 1st. That's when you have to commit to deposit at one school. This kid was scrambling in panic because he didn't know where to start, all right? Whereas what we're doing with your kids is we're trying to get them to distill that list, right? You know, there's a fallacy when people say that's the perfect school for you, or a perfect school for me. There's many good fit schools, right? We've had kids in the past that fell in love with a certain school and then closed off listening to other possibilities. Applied ED, doesn't happen that often. Applied ED, and then halfway through the spring term, they're like, I'm not happy here, you know? Because they fell in love with a rank, or they fell in love with what someone said, you know, about a school, okay? This is a big thing. We want our students, we want your kids to take that active and leading role, just like a CEO, right? If a CEO sticks their head in the sand, they're gonna get fired. No, we can't fire your kids, right? And that's why we are really proactive. We might call home and say, what's your son or daughter? I'm sorry. What is it?
Son, Ryan.
Ryan. So we might say, Ryan missed his 3rd meeting, you know. So let's figure something out for Ryan, okay? And sometimes kids are just nervous, or they have so many competing time demands between 6 classes and a couple varsity sports and a couple club memberships or on campus or whatever. So sometimes we need to thin it out a little bit, lighten their load so they can focus on that planning aspect. Oops. Went right through that moment. So this is, Sid Dalby is the number 2 admissions person at Smith College. She's wonderful. She's written books. What is it? Panic Guide to College Planning. That's a great read. She has a saying which just resonates. As she speaks, you'll see her next May, right? She's our guest speaker. She has a saying, she said, there's a lid for every pot, right? And there is. So our goal, this partnership, is to identify which pots would be good fits, okay? In ninth grade, basically, the purpose of ninth grade is we want your kids, and your kids are now sophomores, but we want them to experience high school, to learn what it is to be a high school student, to try things, to get outside their comfort zone, right? To find mentors on campus, right? That's why we really push hard the advisor program, and a mentor doesn't have to be an advisor, but it could be a football coach, or it could be, you know, college counselor, whatever that is. But we want them to try different things because we all know that they don't know what they don't know, right? So we want to expose them to different things to find different interests. Now again, if they become interested in the oboe in ninth grade, they're probably not going to get that scholarship to Brown, right? The reason I say that, we did have a girl that 10 years ago got a scholarship to Brown because she played the oboe. She was really good. But starting high school on the right foot and in the right manner, being open to challenges, being open to getting outside the comfort zone, you know. It's really rewarding when I see kids that come in as freshmen that are kind of timid and uncertain, and then they're getting up at chapel junior year, you know, talking about a club that they're trying to enroll people to join. And that's what happens here. You probably have seen some of that, some changes in your kids already after a year or a year and a half. So, so that's freshman year. You know, right now we're starting to talk about course selection, right? So the only thing we do with freshmen is we introduce ourselves. We talk a little bit about where college counseling is, and we tell the kids that the most important piece of the college application, ultimately, is your transcript. So be mindful about how you approach your studies and the courses that you select, okay? In sophomore year is when the formal college planning process begins. Your sons and daughters, next week, I forget, sophomore sem begins next week. It's a weekly class. Basically, we're putting our foot in the water to try to begin this process, and it begins with knowing yourself. You know, so there's a number of different things that we do to help kids get to know themselves a little bit better. You know, kids they're so busy that they don't really have too many opportunities to analyze and to self-reflect. And that's a good place to start in creating that lens to identify a good fit, right? So, sophomore seminar will be once a week for the next 3 or 4 weeks. And we do a number of different surveys, and we talk about interests a student might have. We welcome them to come in if they want to. We've already met with a few sophomores. If your child hasn't come in, they're not behind, okay? We talk a little bit about careers, not heavy, you know. I mean, I'm 54 and I love what I'm doing, but I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, you know. So it's okay not to know. Even if a kid did know, you're going to change their mind. You know, there's a statistic, I think 3/4 of students that go to college change their major at least once. It's probably even more than 3/4, okay? We talked to them about this software that we have. It's called Naviance Family Connection. You folks, parents, will get a parent account. In that, it's the Cadillac of search engines for college. When we were going through it, at least when I was, I had this Peterson's guide that weighed about 50 pounds, and that's probably when I tore my shoulder. But you know, it took forever to dog ear and to highlight, and in a matter of 4 minutes, you can do a search with Naviance that would have taken us 4 years back in the day. I mean, 4 hours. So that's part of it. PSATs, we moved that to the spring for sophomores starting last year. The reason why we moved it to the spring is some of the stuff that the PSAT tested your kids didn't even learn by the fall of sophomore year. So that's one thing. The other thing is it's spaced nicely between the PSAT junior year, right? So it's 6 months between the PSAT 10 and now the PSAT in junior year. Students that score high enough on that could be eligible for National Merit Scholarship consideration. The bad news is Massachusetts has a lot of high school kids, so they're competing against a much bigger pool. If you want to move to Bozeman, Montana, that might be, you might have a higher chance for a scholarship. So, the other thing too is as students emerge from sophomore seminar, they'll know themselves a little bit better, right? They'll begin this process of college planning. So hopefully the unknowns and the fear have dissipated a little bit. And they'll start to identify some of the qualities that they want to apply to those filters, those search filters. So it's a good time to visit some campuses over the summer, okay? I think any visit is a good visit at this point, even if it's the local college in town, Winnick or UMass or okay? Does that make sense? All right. Why don't we hold off on those other questions until we, okay?
Okay.
Cool?
Yeah.
We're good? Passing it.
So moving into junior year, we continue with our seminars and we'll start junior seminar in the winter trimester. And that's really focusing on all aspects of the college application process. So we're combining the ideas that we started thinking about in the spring of sophomore year of knowing yourself and the importance of self-reflection, and then combining that with what colleges are actually looking for so that we can work with the students on building their college lists. So with junior seminar and then with the one-on-one meetings, that's really the main focus of junior year. So right now we're pretty busy with our juniors, meeting with them and talking about different parts of the application in terms of their testing plan, who they might ask for rec letters, essay ideas, and also, most importantly, thinking about what colleges they want to apply to. So by the end of junior year, our goal is to send home a list to the students and parents that is reflective of what we've talked about and hopefully some of the visits that the students have done. And like John said at the beginning, is a balanced list. So that's really the main focus of junior year. College visits continues to play a big role. So we encourage students to, if they can, try to plan vacations or long weekends to possibly see a college or two. Definitely over the summertime is a great time to see some schools. Around this time next year, there'll be a lot of open houses targeted to juniors. So it's just a great way for students to get that initial sense, like the vibe of the school. And again, relates to that whole fit idea. Like I mentioned, we're working with students on their standardized testing plan. They took the PSATs for the second time in their junior year in the fall. And then in the spring, they'll likely take the SAT and or the ACT, maybe more than once as well. And then we also start working with students on the college essay. So next week, the juniors will have a evening presentation with a speaker talking about the Common App essay and kind of the brainstorming process for that. And then in our individual meetings, we'll kind of pick up on that and continue talking to them one-on-one on their ideas and work with them on that so that hopefully they write it over the summertime. That's the goal. And that they come back senior year with a finalized essay. And then senior year, the real heart of the application process goes by really quickly at the beginning of the year because a lot of the process has moved up to early action and early decision applications. So the majority of our students are applying early. So by October 1st, hopefully they've kind of finalized their list and they've really started finalizing the applications because many of them will submit applications by November 1st. So the beginning of senior year is really important. It goes by really quickly. By then, hopefully they've really taken ownership for the process as well. But like John said, we'll track them down if we have to, and we'll let you know. But the main work with us individually is on reviewing their applications and getting them ready to submit. And then sometimes there's kind of like over the winter a period of silence where we don't hear from them, but now they're all back again in their offices, giving us, you know, good news about where they've been admitted and chatting with us about, you know, the decisions they have to make. Some people have a couple different offers that they're having a tough time deciding between, and they might go back on revisit days, and by May 1st, hopefully they're really happy with their decision, where they're going, and then they're graduating. Just a quick kind of off the timeline, but related to what students have to do in the application process, a quick look at standardized testing. All of the sophomores will be taking the PSAT 10 next week. And this is really just a practice SAT. The scores are for the students, for you, for us, just to get some feedback on strengths, weaknesses, areas that they can improve on. And they can use that information to maybe do some prep for the PSAT and MSQT that they'll take in the fall of their junior year, and which John mentioned, they could be eligible for National Merit Scholarship depending on their score. That National Merit Scholarship is really the only link to college admissions in terms of the PSAT. Otherwise, the score is still really just for the student and the school and the parents to help do some preparation for the actual SAT that they'll take in the spring of their junior year. So it's kind of like the 6-month chunk starting now, where they'll do the PSAT 10, and then in the fall they'll do the PSAT junior year, and then in the spring they'll do the regular SATs. And in addition to the SAT, colleges also accept the ACT. It's another standardized test, and it's equally accepted. Some students prefer it over the SAT, so we encourage students to try both. It historically was a test more popular in the Midwest, and the SAT was more popular on the East and West Coast, so you may not be familiar with it, but it is, you know, increasingly becoming popular. So we do encourage students to try both. And then usually, you know, they'll get their scores back, decide which version, which test they liked better, what one they felt more comfortable with, which one they did better on, and then pick one to focus on, prep for that, and take it again a second time. But usually we're not encouraging students to test more than 2 times typically. Some colleges require the SAT subject tests. Usually the most selective colleges will require subject tests. Sometimes colleges with certain program, like engineering programs, might require some specific subject tests in physics or math. It's an hour-long test that demonstrates skills in a specific area. So this is something that we, you know, we'll talk to students about this sophomore year so that they know what they are, but definitely junior year, so that if it's something that they think they might need, we can work with them on planning when they should take it. And then also, there's a great list of test optional schools. Fairtest.org is a really great website that compiles a list of all the colleges that don't use standardized tests in the admissions process. And it's a growing number of schools, and increasingly some more selective colleges that you might not think would be test optional are. And who knows, given the scandals that are going on, maybe even more colleges will become test optional, which I hope they do. So this is a really good website to visit as well. And we'll talk with students too. You know, some students just aren't great test takers, and it's not reflective of what, you know, their abilities are as a student, as a person. And so there's some really great resources there. Does anybody have any questions about that? I think we're, oh, I messed that up. The clicker will go.
I think we were just going to open it up to
Yeah.
questions. Does
It's
anybody,
frozen.
well, the first question is the hardest.
At what point on campus do you offer the SAT prep class for those students that choose to take it?
Sure. There's a number of different options and formats. The on-campus classes, they begin in the winter of junior year, and they meet for it's just about 12 Sundays leading up to that May SAT. We have tried to offer an ACT class that just hasn't been enough interest. So the company, Summit Education, that's our contractor, they have canceled that class each year. So there's also another class. It's a shorter class that starts that first Sunday. So if the kids that didn't take Summit in their junior year, they can take it in their senior year. So then we're able to offer it to postgraduates too. And that again is about, I think it leads up into November, so it's like 9, 8,
8
something.
weeks, yeah, probably, yes.
For those kids that don't want to give up, because it's a good chunk of time on a Sunday, you know, and that's kind of one day, either family day or day of homework or day to relax. We offer a couple of options for online prep. We subscribe to Method Test Prep. It's linked directly to your sons and daughters' Naviance account. It's a really good program. It provides online self-paced ACT and SAT prep. We tell the kids, though, it's not unlike lifting weights. You have to lift the weights. You can't go to the gym and just stare at the weights. You have to schedule that into your day, right? But it has practice tests, full-length practice tests scored automatically. It has quizzes. It identifies the 18 skills that are tested in the critical reading section and the math section. So it's a really comprehensive program. I wish more kids used it, so that's another option. The third option is the College Board has partnered with Khan Academy, Khan, and Khan Academy, these guys are saying, he's made all of his material available for free, and it's full-length comprehensive SAT prep, and then this year he's also Khan is offering ACT prep, and that's connected directly to your son and daughter's College Board account. I mean, if prep makes sense, if kids are going to do it, right? I think that it can be costly. There are some private tutors that, sometimes charge up to $150 for 3 hours. It's really expensive. Sometimes kids get distracted in a classroom setting. That's why they want to do it on their own. Or if that's not for them, there are private tutors that you can recommend.
And once the students get their PSAT 10 scores back this year, the scores are automatically linked to, or can be automatically linked to that Khan Academy prep. So, the scores are available online through College Board, and if the student wants, they can go ahead and say, yeah, I want to see, where my strengths and where my weaknesses are, and Khan will kind of tailor the prep to what the student needs to focus on. So I know that's probably what everyone wants to do over the summertime, but that could be something to just at least peek at, to kind of see what areas they could focus on over the summer, over September, to get ready for the October PSAT.
Did Sarah or Peter do test prep?
They did,
Yep.
yeah. And actually, so Peter had purchased the test prep book that was available through College Board.
Mhm.
They recommended one. So, and it wasn't that far between Peter and now Sarah, so she used the same book. That was very helpful. It was very helpful. It was great to have that. I also took into consideration the learning style of my children, and Peter specifically liked having a book and liked having something tangible versus doing something online. Whether it was, not every kid can do a YouTube video, but my daughter did. And so each student has a different learning style. Think about your student, and how they learn best. But for what I thought was a nominal cost for the book, you definitely should have it. It gave them options, and then there's also a practice test in the back of that book. So my son took that practice test on his own a couple of times before he took the actual test.
Great.
Yeah.
Is there any evaluation between method and common as far as which is more rigorous or preparation?
They're both really good.
Because my son took some fun and he didn't prep me for the math classes and all.
Yeah.
It was okay,
Okay.
but it wasn't as rigorous as he thought it should be.
We're more familiar with the method test prep, right? I think it's a great product. Mo made a good point in that your sons and daughters should take the SAT and the ACT. Sometimes just taking the cold in the junior year and then identifying which feels more comfortable. The rub on the ACT is kids feel more pressed for time, right? And there's a science section. It's not like chem science, it's more like graph plotting, interpretation, things like that. But I think a good thing to do, and because we've already paid for it, is take the practice tests for ACT through method test prep and the SAT through, and then that can help too.
Do they start their Naviance campus in the spring, the sophomore? Yeah, they'll start that.
Yeah, you're great.
I was going to say, can I give a shout out for the Naviance? There is a plethora of information for you, for us, the parents. Our kids are going to be focused on what college counseling is sort of driving them to, and they will be taking time to learn it, but there's a lot of information there that just wowed my husband and I. My husband's a stats guy, so when he discovered you can click on a school, and once there's actually some grading from the tests that go into the Naviance for your child, it'll actually chart them against previous WMA, data of how many people have applied there, where does your child fall on that chart, which helps you when your children are looking at either reach schools, the likely schools, and the target schools. And so you can help with forming their list. It's going to be, that'll encompass a little bit of all those. You want to have those reach, you want to have the targets, you want to have the likelies. So there's a lot in Naviance. Big shout out for that.
Yeah, there's a lot in it. And so, like, one of the ways we introduce it at first is kind of saying, here's your accounts, and it's like a new phone. You have to go on it frequently to see, how, like, what's there and how it all works. For sophomores in particular, we'll focus the majority of our time in the About Me section. So there's these different sections that Naviance has: colleges, careers, About Me, My Planner. The colleges section is where you can research colleges, do lots of different college searches, look at specific colleges. And in About Me is where we have a lot of different surveys that we can use to help students kind of start learning about themselves. We'll develop our own surveys, and then there's different surveys that Naviance has partnered with. For example, Do What You Are is based off of Myers-Briggs test, and so just some different ways to get students to think about what their interests are, what their strengths are, how they like to learn, how they like to interact with people. So they're just kind of tastes into getting to know themselves.
I guess the one suggestion that I would have too is that if any of your kids, if you or they think they might have some basis for accommodations on testing or classes or anything like that, try to get a jump on that early as soon as you can, because it can make a gigantic difference in their testing and how that plays out. And also, don't be shy if your kid's willing to take a test a third time, because it can make a big difference.
It's a good point. I think that the studies show between the second and the third time, if you don't do something significant in terms of prep, there's not a lot of change, but sometimes there is, definitely. As Mo mentioned, we're just pleased that more and more schools have determined that testing is not a very good predictor of academic ability or success. You know, I think it was Bates College was the first school. They did a 10-year longitudinal study, and they tracked GPAs for students that graduated from Bates and submitted scores, and Bates students that graduated and didn't submit scores. And there was 1/10 of 1 point of a difference between the submitters and the non-submitters, and they didn't reveal who had a higher GPA. So, but that is that's proof in the pudding that, yeah, it's, because the SAT and the ACT, like any standardized test, can be gamed, you know, there are schools that meet every day for 8 hours a day, they're called cram schools, and how about that? How about that for a fun summer, you know? Woo! Cram for the SAT. So it's a test that can be manipulated, and I mean, USC learned that the hard way. You know, actually, that was an interesting. They have a new term now. I think I heard it on NPR. It's called contracted cheating. Yeah, I thought that was unfortunate, but interesting. So, other questions?
Can you speak to what you might look for when you go to schools on visits, who you talk to, which offices you should be in touch with, and good times to go?
So typically, nowadays, you'd go on to the school's website and go to the admissions page, and it'll say visit us or something like that. And depending on the school, almost all of them will offer a 2-part visit, which involves an admissions information session. So someone from the admissions office will be in the lobby and speak for 20, 30 minutes and see if there's any questions. And then you go off on tours with students. On the tours, you see some classroom buildings, usually a dining hall, usually the student center, usually a dormitory room or things like that. It really depends. So you plan about 3 hours total. And most of them offer a morning and an afternoon. Some offer Saturday morning, so there's several juniors tomorrow going to Boston, stay there tomorrow night. They're going in the afternoon, and they're going on tours on Northeastern and BU on Saturday mornings. There's actually 3 tours this time of year. That won't be all year. If your son or daughter is interested in a particular program, like nursing or engineering, there are often special open houses for that department or that school. And you want to look for that, because those will be much more informative than just your campus tour and general information session. Some schools even have programs where you can stay the night before. Some have shadow a student, like we do here. Pick classes. At this time of year, it is focused on recruiting senior or the admitted students, our current seniors. But there are some junior open houses, and there'll be more of those in the fall, where they might have a whole afternoon. I lived in Houston for a while, and Rice University, for example, on middle Sunday afternoon in September, it's Rice Open House for Houston area families. And there'd be 6 or 7 different things going on all afternoon. So parents might go to the financial aid workshop, and students might go to the residential life student activities workshop, which would be more important to them. So, but definitely do sign up. One of the things our kids are discovering is that these tours now are filling up with juniors, particularly because some of the public schools will be on vacation next week or this week. So.
Did we learn too, I think, from some admissions officers at one of our seminars about the tracking that starts to happen too?
Yeah, so 2 other things. One is the idea of interview. Your kids at this point are way too young for that, or not prepared, but maybe in the senior year, some schools, particularly small schools, will offer one-on-one interviews. And if your son or daughter feels particularly strong about a school and prepared for that interview, and that's something we can help with, then they should have an interview. More and more, particularly the big state schools, and now so a lot of the Ivy League schools, there's no interviewing. Or if there is, it's with graduates. They just can't interview the 10,000 kids and read the 40,000 applications at the same time. So a lot of those big name schools have gone to alumni interviewing done regionally.
Which I can confirm that.
Yeah, no, good.
I can confirm that my oldest son, the school that he applied to, Barnes University, they actually required an interview with an alum. And due to location, and there's folks all over, the kids all over the United States, it was a Skype interview, but that had to be part of his application process. Had he not done that, had he missed it, I'm sure that they would have looked the other way. So that's.
The other point is demonstrated interest. And not necessarily Harvard and those schools will track to see, did they come to campus, did they have a tour, did they have a, but a lot of the other schools, particularly the smaller schools, by visiting or by coming to the presentations here, we have over 80 typically in the fall. We're having 3 or 4 this spring. The kids fill out a card. If they register for a tour, they're in the database. And it can make the difference between 2 strong candidates if one's demonstrated interest and one is sometimes what's called a stealth applicant. No contact until the application shows up on the deadline. And choosing between those 2 kids, they might waitlist the strong unconnect, or the kid with little interest, demonstrated interest, and take the one who demonstrated some level of interest. That's a great point.
The schools that subscribe to that approach, I think it's done for 2 reasons. One, for rankings. So U.S. News and World Report came out with their rankings like 1983. That's when they started that. I think it was the biggest disservice that's ever been done to families and college planning. But because what happens is there's poor fits, right? You're going to go to XYZ school because it's ranked 3rd for accounting, right? Disregarding all the other things that define fit for a student. So the other thing, so if American University, for example, awesome school down in DC, they're big time into demonstrated interest. So primarily, I think, because they want to enroll kids that want to be there, right? I mean, why have a school of 2,000 kids if they don't want to be there? That would be kind of a dull and uninspiring place to be. But they also do, so if they admit a kid and the kid comes, that's a yield. Right? Yield is a big part of college rankings. So they would rather admit kids that have a really strong interest, and they demonstrate that interest by even things like opening up emails. They can track that. It's kind of big brotherish, but it does make sense to an extent. So, but we would be able to advise you on which schools they do track interest in those schools.
Can I ask, do the colleges tracks their social media accounts?
Yep. Not all, many.
Okay. Do they have a back door of, let's say, something the students put on as a free?
I think college admissions people are pretty understanding with things, and they understand that kids make dumb decisions. It's not malfeasance, it's just thoughtlessness, I haven't sat on that side of the desk, but just to chime into communication with reps, they are forgiving to an extent. If you do some of the big no-nos in social media, that will probably preclude you from consideration at school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, if it's something that's like still easily like seen on their accounts, then they could see that. But in terms of like things that have been taken down and harder to find, I also don't know that reps have enough time to do that kind of searching. So, I mean, hopefully there's not like a really terrible thing that's hidden somewhere, but.
But we tell the kids that too, You never know who's
There was an
watching.
article in the Times a few years ago that surveyed, and at that time, 4 or 5 years ago, about 30% of admissions people will look at someone's social media. And now, and it tends to be the younger admissions rep, no surprise there. But it's so easy, you just met with a kid, you're on an airplane, you've got a list of 8 names, and you just click through Facebook. And so we tell the kids, nothing you wouldn't want to show your grandmother should be on your Facebook, and your email should not be something silly or worse. I did it while we've done additions. I had a student, Satan Lover 666 at Yahoo, and Sweet Sexy Babe 16. She insisted that was her 4-H animal. That was a reference to that. She's from Montana, all places.
I remember a kid, great kid, but his was a party animal at Gmail or something.
Your kids can all use their woman.
I love studying it. But it's gotta be authentic, so that's part of it too. Part of it is just being authentic, and Sarah, back to you in a second. The authentic approach applies to everything, and identifying that list, right, in what you write about in your college essay, what you say in an interview, it has to be authentic, because otherwise, what's the point? So, Sarah?
Do you have suggestions for how to approach college visits, like summer or sophomore year, when we're really not in it yet, but maybe want to better be
We also found a lot of colleges didn't have it in the summer. You can go visit and take a look, but there was no programs.
Yeah.
Like the state colleges have. You
Yeah.
kind of visit constantly, UMass has it constantly, but a lot of the other schools did not for the summer. So we
Yeah,
just
there's that.
welcome you walk around.
Right, and some will do self-guided.
Yeah,
and
exactly. So
Self-guided.
that's for you.
I think the visits after sophomore year should be lighter, explain to your kids, like, hey, we're gonna be going within 20 miles of Ole Miss, let's go check it out, And again, these early visits there's a lot of value just in the exercise of visiting, figuring out that there is an information session followed by a tour, having an opportunity to ask questions like, tell me about the internships, or what are the relationships like with professors? How accessible are, those types of questions. I think when our juniors start to go visit, then there should be more attention, I think, aligned with their interests and filtered already. And, it might not end up on that list of 10 or 8 or whatever it is, but the visit is the most effective tool in the toolbox, And it's going to be funny, when you go to do these visits, you might leave, and you're probably not going to say anything, share your ideas as your kid does, but you might be like, this place is awesome, and you get in the car and let's get the heck out of here. And it's so, right? Did you experience that?
I did, yeah. And actually, can I add something before I tell you about my husband's funny experience? She just wanted to bail on a tour.
That's a real small.
So about a year ago now, when my daughter was in her junior year, and we were looking forward to the senior year, we, knowing that she had a lot to get through the back end of the year with exams and finishing up, but we had already started to work with her to devise a short list of schools that we were going to see within the next couple of months. We knew we didn't want to take up the whole summer. We also knew that we didn't want to overwhelm her. They have a lot going on. There's already a lot of pressure that they put on themselves for school. So, and if I can also make mention, there's a book that we had picked up at Barnes & Noble. It's called the Fisk book. And so we used the Fisk book to complement Naviance in coming up with a list of the first 5 schools that we're going to look at. And we went to those 5 schools on Naviance or their admissions website to see when are they available, when are they offering tours. And we said, okay, let's plug some dates in for June. And we plugged in those dates. We had the kids, we had my daughter sign up through her account, let her do it. And then we also gave them, we gave, in both instances, our son and daughter, we had said, we're going to drive 3 to 4 hours. So this is your window. Let's pick something that's a rural college. Let's pick a city college. Let's pick a suburban college. Because they weren't really sure what they wanted. And you might be surprised. When my son thought that he wanted to go to a university in downtown Boston, once he went to it and he toured it, he said, oh, yeah, no, not for me, not the right fit. And likewise, my daughter had something similar. So my daughter had wanted to see a school on the Eastern Seaboard. We won't name the school, but that they had that experience, and that my husband took her on that tour. And they were halfway through the tour and they bailed. She says, I can't, this isn't the place for me, I'm just going to leave. So, okay, my husband was like, this place is great, this is beautiful. He's like, all right, guess we have to go. So it really is, and it's all about their fit. So we really pushed to, my husband just said, okay, so we're done today, let's go have lunch, we'll head back home. But, so if that can help in any way, I can also say, for our family, having done this twice now, trying to get most of your visits done before they start senior year. Because once they walk through these doors in September, they are busy, they are thinking they should already have their essay done. If they don't, then they're thinking about writing that essay for the Common App, or for each school. don't try to cram in any school visits in September. So try to have those done before that, at the end of summer as they're going into their senior year.
If I could put a plug for that FISC guide, it's FISKE, I don't own stock in it, but I think it's really reasonable.
It
And
is.
rather than rankings, just lists, and rather than objective information like the old college handbook, you know, it's this thick. It's 2 or 3 page narratives about 400 or 500 of the more selective schools, including most of the schools our kids are looking at. And it talks about the town and the history and the traditions and some of the stronger departments, and they quote students about the food or the living arrangements, the sports, you know, and kind of summary opening and summary closing statements. I just find it very reasonable. It's $20. It's well worth it, especially if you're planning visits and you're thinking you've got one school in Chicago that sounds good. Do we spend all that money and time to get there and discover that your son doesn't want to get out of the car? Or do you do some homework like that? So I'm glad this worked for you.
And actually on the FISC, if I can share something else, my oldest son is very hesitant, believe it or not. I think the looming decision-making process was a little much for him at the end of junior year, going into senior year. And we needed to see schools, we needed to get some visits on, and he had kind of pushed us off until the end of school. He said, when I'm done with school, I gotta get past essays, exams. Once I'm done with that, then I'll start. Very resistant, and I know at the beginning of tonight, several of you put up your hands that you had that sort of hesitant student. So we all know our kids best, right? So I took the FISC book and I left it out on the cocktail table. In our home, he can't resist a book. And so I left that out there and I watched, and sure enough, when school finished, about a week after, summer vacation had settled in, the book disappeared, and it was in his room, and he was dog-earing pages, and then I could see his naviance has been open, and now he had a list that he could come to me and Dad with. So, think about how you know your student. If they're a little hesitant, a little trepidation, they might be just a little overwhelmed and worried, so, you never know where your pearls of wisdom are going to come from, so you might want to try that.
That's a great point and a great approach, because I think sometimes, it's like the more you push it, the more resistant kids get. And, there was one recently, a question came up, and the admissions officer said, rather than talk about college with your junior, your kid that's a junior, rather than talk about it every night, talk about it on Thursday nights. That's the only night. That's going to be college discussion night, right? So the kid gets a breather, and doesn't feel like, you're on him or her, but I think that's a great, let it happen, organically, right? Unless it's not happening, and then we'll think about it, right?
I have dorm duty. I was just some.
All right.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, so again, having just gone through this, my son's back is graduating a month or so. One of the things that I would also just kind of offer out is if your kids have a particular couple of schools that they think they're really interested in, try to get them there at a time when either in the spring or in the fall, when the kids are actually there as opposed to during the summer.
A live campus, yeah.
Or during the winter. I mean, those are the times when we tried to visit schools, and it's almost impossible to get a feel for that potential fit because the kids aren't there. You can't see them interacting, as opposed to in the spring or the fall. And again, tough times for our kids. But if you're planning this far in advance, and we didn't do much of this stuff this far in advance, it's really helpful to try
But
to
it's
get them there when the
also
kids
not
are
too
there.
late, because my son just went through it, and it was Accepted Students Day that he chose his school, not pre. So all that pre-planning for us and everything, nope. He went there, talked to the kids, talked to the professors, and changed his mind.
So there was enough in the school that he deposited, there was enough there
Well,
that,
we first
so
went in
good,
just
yeah.
to take the tour, and we'd been accepted, we were
Yeah.
sure, and we took the tour, and all of us were like, wow, we love this,
Yeah.
but we didn't say a word, we waited, and then he said, these kids are great, I liked it, and he was the one that decided right there. So all the looking at other schools, and he was talking Texas, he was talking
Yeah.
California, and it didn't matter, he's almost gonna be in
Canada.
But I help them figure it out.
Absolutely,
So
was the
the
interactions.
schools that he didn't
So
like.
I
help them
totally
figure it
agree,
out.
it's the interactions with the students during the actual school days and whatnot that makes a difference.
So is it okay then to pull them out of school, especially if you're traveling, a distance, to pull them out on Friday and Monday to do?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a good idea if your child is struggling academically or just has a ton on the plate and that's going to add to the anxiety level. But we provide time for juniors and seniors to go to miss classes and go to campuses. And, we talk about, we don't limit it to number of days because, if you're going to California, it's going to be one a day. But typically it's like three visits, not 3 campuses, just 3 trips. But if you need more, and it makes sense, and it's okay with advisor and Eric Kimbloom and all the folks that think it's in kids' best interest, sure.
And can you work it around, like, the certain breaks that they have, the holiday breaks or the October
Spring
break
break.
or something?
You can do it.
Because I always notice, like, on account, students can't leave early, for travel arrangements and stuff, so.
Yeah, but that's when you get your college advisor involved and.
Yeah, and I think our spring break is 2.5 weeks, so.
And it's early.
Yeah, and there's colleges usually have a 1-week spring break, so there's time where we're off and the college is not off. And so that's where we really do want the planning done so that you don't need to extend your vacation since it's already 2.5 week
Right.
vacation. But there might be other times, like a long weekend, where it just doesn't make, like, you have to come back on that Wednesday or something, like, that's fine, we understand that. We just kind of need context.
I'll also say that the students that get a form, and all of their teachers have to sign off on it on the day that they might miss class. So I learned this the hard way, which was, hey, I'm off on Friday, can I take you to a college? And my daughter said, oh my God, I'll never have enough time to get all those signatures, I can't do that. But there is a form, and they get it signed by their teachers, knowing that they're not going to be there that day. And I think they're allowed 3 or 4 visits with that form, and it's not going to impact. The teachers will know and give them leniency towards if they have an assignment that's due. They know that they'll be out.
We did have one recently, these 3 boys wanted to go and check out, I think, every school on the West Coast. Because they were going to be gone for 9 days, and so that's a boondoggle. And we told them, so you can't do that. That's not what this is designed for. The one kid, they said, why are you leaving on Friday? He goes, well, we want to give ourselves time to enjoy ourselves. I was like, that's not what this is about. They get in and get out.
John, Mo, could you just speak to how you communicate to parents?
Sure.
Just, what sources, where should they be looking? Where, does it come home in a backpack? Is it on the website? That kind of thing. Because communication doesn't always travel well
Sure.
through children, so.
Yeah, there's a whole, there's a whole, so for starters, we communicate frequently with the parents of our college advisees, right? These things are great, but, sometimes it helps to have that one-on-one, it always helps to have that one-on-one conversation. So that can be a phone call, email, Naviance is a good tool for communication. The other thing that Greg started, which has been great, is we do weekly blogs for juniors. On Sunday nights they go out, and then seniors, it's also on Sunday nights. So I think the junior block started.
Yeah, it starts when we start junior seminar.
Right. So the winter.
So juniors will get that weekly, and then it will move into when they're seniors, and they'll get that through up until January 1st. And by then, we're hoping that they're good. And then it will start over again with the juniors. So it's like a year of weekly communications from us.
Those newsletters are fantastic, chock full of information that comes from the college counseling department. Mr. Walsh sends them out, chock full of information. I saved every single one of them because I would oftentimes want to go back at a separate folder that I would just slide them into. And sometimes I would want to go back and refresh myself because the email contained a lot of time-sensitive information. Hey, here's a heads up. You should be thinking about when to sign up for that ACT. Here's the dates it's coming out. So a lot of good information that sometimes I couldn't digest at 5:30 in the morning when I'm normally reading email. So I saved all of them, you can go back to it, and it's another way too to support your student, because you'll be in the know what's going on,
Right.
and you can very coyly say to them, so what's new in college counseling? Are you due to have a meeting with your college counselor anytime soon?
My mother's wicked smart.
Right, you just happen to know that information. So it's a nice way too, if your student, again, is maybe a little resistant and kind of push back on, mom and dad are always in my business, you're in the know and you have another way to approach it. It's all in how you wrap the gift. So-
Yeah, and we had a parent point out last year, well, you might have, I don't know.
Yeah,
if
might
you-
have been me.
We were pros Henry, so we
Yeah.
tried to
I have
distill
one
it
that
down.
doesn't read. His younger brother, the one that's a sophomore, he reads. So he would actually interpret for the other one what he needs to do, but the one that doesn't read,
Yeah,
it was very prose heavy, so a kind of a bulleted list of this is what you guys need to do. But from a parent's standpoint, it was amazing.
Yeah.
yeah.
But from the non-reader, it was, yeah. So that was an interesting, but I would say the communication was the right communication. I never felt like I didn't know what was coming, and it was very,
Good,
and I was pleasantly surprised by the whole process. That was,
thank you, and please keep the constructive.
yeah, it was great. It was very helpful, the whole thing.
All right. So we are at the end of our time, a little bit over, but I wanted to thank College Counseling for coming. I think it's been a very nice added value for parents and even for myself, because every single time I come to one of these, I learn a little bit more about what WMA does. The other thing to remember is over Family Weekend, there are on Saturday, is it the Saturday of Family Weekend? They will do a full kind of timeline of the college presentation, the college process, as
That's
well as,
Friday. Yep,
yeah, and then, that's Friday. And then
Yep.
there's also the financial aid one that you offer as
Saturday.
well on
Yep.
Saturday. So keep an eye out when you're scheduling your conferences on those days to try and tie that in, and don't schedule conferences during that time. And you can come on down here, sit, I think it's the same room we do them in. It's about an hour, and it just kind of gives you an update, and it kind of refreshes your memory about what's happening and what's coming next.